Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines. In the United States, thousands of protesters flood cities in all 50 states. They rally to condemn President Donald Trump and his actions in the biggest nationwide outcry since his second term began. Israel's army admits its soldiers made mistakes in the killings of 15 emergency workers in southern Gaza in March. A video shows a convoy of ambulances, a UN car and a fire truck coming under fire near Rafah. Trump's tariffs begin to shake global markets, wiping out $5 trillion in S&P 500 value. Trump urges Americans to hang tough, while advisor Elon Musk says he hopes for zero tariffs between the United States and Europe. Paramedics rush to 2 districts in Kyiv after explosions shake the Ukrainian capital. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanks nations for condemning the latest Russian strikes as conflict rages on. Palestinian group Hamas releases video of 2 Israeli hostages alive and held in Gaza as Israel continues its strikes. This comes as French President Emmanuel Macron plans a summit with Egyptian and Jordanian leaders to discuss the Gaza plan. Rains fall on parts of earthquake-hit Myanmar, complicating relief efforts and raising the risk of disease across the region. This comes as the death toll from the disaster nears 3,500. Media aligned with Yemen's Houthi rebels says 1 person is killed and several others are injured in airstrikes on the country's north. The rebels have accused the United States of carrying out the attacks. Indian President Narendra Modi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Sri Lankan President Dissanayake join the launch of the signalling system for the Maho Anurad Hampura railway line, a project supported by the Indian government. French Prime Minister François Bayrou slams Donald Trump's support for Marine Le Pen, calling it interference. Trump earlier dismissed Le Pen's embezzlement conviction as a witch hunt. As stated by the Houthi officials, at least 2 people were killed in US airstrikes in Yemen's Houthi-controlled Sada province overnight. On the other hand, a video posted by President Donald Trump suggests a much higher death toll. The Houthis claim the strike hit a solar power shop, while US officials remain silent on specifics. Trump's shared drone footage showed a devastating blast wiping out a group he claimed were Houthis, planning an attack. This was followed by US Central Command releasing another video of fighter jets taking off from a US carrier. Yemen's rebel-run Saba news agency said the strike actually targeted an Eid al-Fitr gathering in Hodeida, killing and wounding dozens, including a Houthi police colonel. This comes as the Trump administration ramps up its campaign in Yemen, conducting over 200 strikes since mid-March in response to the Houthis' attacks on international shipping. Analysts say the US strategy has shifted, now targeting Houthi command networks and infrastructure. The Houthis have launched over 100 attacks on ships since late 2023, sinking 2 vessels and killing 4 sailors. The strikes mark a significant escalation in the region and appear tied to wider efforts by Washington to pressure Iran over its nuclear program. Moving on now. Tensions between the US and Iran escalate as Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi rejects the idea of direct negotiations with the United States. His comments come after US President Donald Trump expressed a preference for talks with Iran. In a statement, Araghchi called direct talks meaningless, citing the US threat to use force and contradictory positions from its officials. He emphasized that such behavior violates the United Nations Charter and undermines the prospect of meaningful discussions. The exchange marks another chapter in the ongoing diplomatic standoff between the 2 nations. Tens of thousands participated in demonstrations across the United States in what appeared to be the largest protests since Donald Trump returned to the White House. Under the banner "Hands Off," protests took place in over 1,000 cities, expressing opposition to the administration's policies on abortion, immigration, trade and civil liberties. In Washington, an estimated 20,000 people gathered on the National Mall, where speakers, including Representative Jamie Raskin, criticised what they described as authoritarian tactics. Similar sentiments were voiced in New York, Los Angeles, Houston and other major cities, with some protesters using terms such as fascist and lunatic to characterize the president's approach. Demonstrations were also held in European locations, including London and Berlin, reflecting broader global attention. The movement was supported by organisations such as Move On and Women's March, which described it as a response to what they see as threats to democracy and human rights. A common slogan repeated throughout the protests was "Hands off our freedoms, hands off our future." Here's what some of the protests in different parts of America had to say.
I'm glad to see the number of people here because of all of the things that the Trump administration is doing, that an unelected official like Elon Musk is doing, mad about the things that are being taken away from the middle class of America and given to the very wealthy, and wanted to be here with my daughter, who I wanted to show her that you can stand up for what is right, and even when you're in Texas, you can support the things that are right, even if there's an awful lot of red around us.
Lack of empathy in this country is depressing, truly. I mean, I feel horrible. We did, immigrants are getting deported. The president's so worried about 0.1% of the population, transgender people, but he doesn't care about the economy, he doesn't talk about lowering prices, inflation. He just says, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that. So I came out here because I felt like I had to.
We have about 100 people who have come down by bus and van from New Hampshire to protest against this outrageous administration who is causing us to lose our allies across the world and causing devastation to people here at home that have needs. They're gutting our government, gutting our services, gutting our institutions, and really ripping apart the fabric of America that we stand on as a great nation.
Tensions are rising in global markets after President Donald Trump urged Americans to hang tough amid growing economic turmoil. His message follows a sweeping tariff move earlier this week, which he's calling an economic revolution. But the impact has been immediate and severe. Markets around the world have plunged. Wall Street's fear index hit a 5-year high. The Nasdaq has entered bear market territory, falling just over 10% in 2 days. Investors are bracing for a possible recession as China retaliates with tariffs on all US goods. In Europe, Elon Musk weighed in, calling for a future free trade zone between the US and the continent. Speaking to Italy's League Party, Musk urged for zero tariffs and freer movement across borders. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
Well, I hope that I hope that the United States and Europe can establish a very close partnership. We obviously are, there's an alliance already, but I'm hopeful that there can be a very close relationship with America and Europe. And I'm hopeful, for example, with the tariffs, that at the end of the day, I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America. That would be that's what I hope occurs. And also more freedom of people to move between Europe and North America, if they wish. If they wish to work in Europe or wish to work in America, they should be allowed to do so, in my view. So that has certainly been my advice to the president.
Italy, along with other EU nations, faces a 20% tariff under Trump's new plan. As global uncertainty grows, financial leaders are voicing concern, worried that this could mark the start of a long trade war. We now move to the Middle East, where a powerful video has surfaced showing the final moments of 15 emergency workers killed by Israeli troops in southern Gaza on March the 23rd. The footage was recovered from a slain paramedic's phone and shows a marked convoy of ambulances with flashing lights approaching the site near Rafah before being hit by gunfire. Let's have a look at this video.
يا رب يكونوا بخير. هي مرمين بسرعة
The Palestine Red Crescent Society says the workers were unarmed and responding to a call for help. Israel initially claimed the vehicles were moving suspiciously in darkness without any lights, but the IDF has now admitted that the account was inaccurate and says that soldiers mistook the convoy for a threat after an earlier strike on Hamas operatives. The military acknowledges mistakes were made and says an internal investigation is underway. International groups are demanding an independent probe. The UN confirms one of its workers was among the dead. Calls for accountability are growing amid ongoing Israeli strikes in Gaza. Here's what the Red Crescent Society said.
رغم أن مركبات الإسعاف تحمل الشارة المحمية دولياً، رغم أن مركبات الإسعاف كانت تضيء أيضاً مصابيح الإنارة، تعمد جنود الاحتلال إطلاق النار بشكل هستيري على فريق الإسعاف الذي كان يرتدي أيضاً زي الهلال الأحمر، ما أدى إلى استشهاد.
We're now joined by Yeshaya Rosenman, Israeli journalist located in Jerusalem, Israel. Thank you very much for joining us, Yeshaya. Obviously, this is a incredibly complicated situation that's happened. What's the general reaction in Israel since this video has emerged of the moments before this incident happened?
Hi, thank you for having me. So, first of all, I would say I think it would be pertinent to clarify what we know and what we don't know. For example, Hamas is, on one hand, Hamas claims that the medics were tied up and executed. This is, of course, nonsense. There's no such footage. IDF completely denies this. What we do know is that the paramedics had arrived at the scene of where the IDF, where an ambush of IDF soldiers had taken out a Hamas terrorist and captured two more. That is the vehicle that they had come to. That is the emergency call they had responded to. Then the soldiers apparently mistook the ambulance for reinforcements that Hamas had sent. What IDF is also claiming to this moment is that 6 of those killed among the ambulance people riding in the ambulance were Hamas terrorists. We're officially part of Hamas's military wing. So the fact that Hamas terrorists move around within ambulances and all that is nothing new. They use hospitals as command centers and also UN positions. The Hamas's central electronic data center is under an UNRWA installation. That's another UN installation. So the fact that the UN, they're all implicated is nothing new. So I would say the Israeli public is not really. Again, the officials are sorting through it, and what they have said till now, they have not confessed to the full accusations of the UN. They have said that they are sorting out the matter, looking into the details, and Israeli investigations take time because, contrary to Hamas, that immediately declares exaggerated claims, we actually look into the facts.
Yeshaya, so it has been 15 medical personnel who were killed in this, including one United Nations worker. Why should people trust an Israeli internal probe into this matter other than an independent probe? Why should people trust that internal outlook on this investigation?
The IDF actually goes through the facts. What people should definitely not trust is Hamas's statements. Hamas's statements are routinely exaggerated and false and complete falsehoods. I'm not sure what this independent investigation would look like. If it's the UN, like I said, the UN is completely compromised. UNRWA workers are Hamas terrorists. So I don't know who this independent investigation would be. I think what should be trusted is if the IDF, what definitely should be trusted is when the IDF will give names and faces those killed, and we'll be able to prove that these people are who was a Hamas operative and who was not.
Yeshaya, the IDF has already said mistakes were made. What's stopping a different body going into Israel, and especially after this video has been released, where Israel's statement has actually been contradicted before this video was released? The fact that Israel said that these ambulances were moving suspiciously in darkness, that has been proved wrong. Why shouldn't they support an independent probe into this?
Well, the IDF is first of all going through the details, checking into it on its own. Why? Because, as I said, the international bodies are compromised. We saw the ICC, International Criminal Court of Justice, with Karim Khan, who is now sanctioned by the United States. There is a deep distrust in Israel of the international bodies, and they will not cooperate with them. The Israeli officials will not allow this.
Yeshaya Rosenman, thank you very much for joining us. We stay in the Middle East now, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will visit Washington in the United States to meet President Donald Trump, discussing key issues including US tariffs, Israel-Turkey relations, Iran, and efforts to free hostages in Gaza. Netanyahu's office confirmed his visit following a surprise invitation from Trump after Netanyahu raised concerns about a 17% tariff imposed on Israeli goods. The tariffs are part of Trump's broader policy, potentially affecting Israeli exports like machinery and medical equipment. This comes despite Israel's move to eliminate its tariffs on US goods following a 40-year free trade agreement. The visit is the first diplomatic effort to negotiate the removal of these tariffs. We continue in the Middle East, where Hamas's armed wing has released a video on April the 5th showing two Israeli hostages, Maxim Herkin and Bar Kapustin, alive in Gaza. Herkin, identified by his family, appears bandaged and under duress. The hostages were taken during Hamas's October the 7th attack that triggered the Gaza war. The video came a day after Israeli forces launched a new ground offensive in Gaza. Hamas warned this could risk hostages' lives. At least 58 hostages remain in captivity, with 34 confirmed dead, including 8 during a ceasefire. The attack on October the 7th resulted in over 1,200 Israeli deaths, and the ongoing conflict in Gaza has resulted in over 50,000 Palestinian deaths, according to local health officials. French President Emmanuel Macron announced that he will hold a trilateral summit with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Jordan's King Abdullah on the Gaza situation. The summit comes amid Israel's push to seize territory in Gaza following the truce collapse, with Israel also escalating attacks on Lebanon and Syria. Macron will reach Cairo today, with talks scheduled for Monday. Macron will then visit the Egyptian port of El Arish to meet humanitarian and security workers and advocate for a ceasefire. The summit highlights the growing international concern over the Gaza conflict. We move over to Europe now, where a missile attack on the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv has injured at least 3 people and caused several blazes, according to the city's mayor. 2 days after, a Russian strike killed 18 people in President Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said paramedics had been sent to 2 districts in Kyiv, while the Ukrainian Air Force said missiles had entered the northern Checheniv region. He also added that 3 people were also injured so far, while fires broke out in non-residential buildings and 8 cars were damaged. Poland's military said it and allied forces had taken to the skies in response to these Russian strikes in the border in western Ukraine, with ground-based air defense systems on high alert. The attacks come as US President Donald Trump pushes for a partial ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. On Saturday, Zelensky slammed the US embassy for what he called a weak statement that did not blame Russia for the deadly missile strike on his home city. The Ukrainian president took aim at the US ambassador Bridget Brink after she posted a message on X on Friday that she said she was horrified that tonight a ballistic missile struck near a playground and a restaurant in Ukraine. In an emotional statement on social media, Zelensky has named each of the 9 children killed in the attack and accused the US embassy of avoiding referring to Russia as the aggressor. The Ukrainian president did, however, show his gratefulness to every country whose representatives spoke out following the Russian missile strike on his hometown. Let's take a look at what he said.
Вчора ввечері і сьогодні багато хто у світі заявив про свою позицію після цього удару, позицію чіткого несприйняття російського терору. Всім, хто це бачить і не заплющує очі, а говорить чітко і ясно правду, не тільки ми в Україні, а весь світ має бути вдячним. Замовчувати те, що це саме Росія вбиває дітей балістикою, це неправильно, це небезпечно. Це тільки підбурює покидьків в Москві. Продовжувати війну та надалі ігнорувати дипломатію. Слабкість ще ніколи не закінчувала війни. Тому я вдячний кожній країні, чиї представники висловились. Лідери, міністри закордонних справ, посольства.
The president also met British and French military chiefs in Kyiv on Friday to discuss a plan to send a reassurance force to Ukraine if and when a deal on ending the conflict is reached. Zelensky wrote on social media that the meeting, when British Chief of the Defence Staff Tony Radakin and French counterpart Thierry Burkhard agreed the first details on how the security contingent of partners can be deployed. Moving on to the US now, where torrential rains and deadly flash floods battered the US South and Midwest once again, compounding devastation from days of violent storms and tornadoes. At least 16 people have died, including 10 in Tennessee and a 9-year-old boy in Kentucky, swept away on his way to school. The Ohio River surged 5 feet in 24 hours, prompting Louisville's mayor to warn of potentially one of the worst floods in the city's history. Nearly 100 tornadoes have been reported since Wednesday, destroying neighborhoods and triggering emergency declarations. The extreme weather has disrupted supply chains in the major cargo hubs like Memphis and Louisville. Forecasts warn rivers will continue rising, especially in areas like north-central Kentucky, where Falmouth was ordered to evacuate ahead of expected record-level flooding. Across the region, infrastructure is buckling. BNSF Railway confirmed a bridge collapse and train derailment in Mammoth Spring. Arkansas, with over a foot of rain in parts of Kentucky and staffing shortages at the National Weather Service, officials say the threat is far from over. Over to South Asia now, where in a major boost to regional connectivity, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Sri Lankan President Dissanayake have jointly launched a new signalling system for the Mahiro-Ane-Puja railway line. The project is supported by the Indian government. The two leaders also flagged off a train from the Anuradhapura, marking a key moment in the growing transport ties between the two nations. Earlier today, they also launched the newly developed railway track for the Maho-Omanthai line, another India-backed project aiming at enhancing the railway infrastructure across Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, in a significant diplomatic gesture, Sri Lanka on Sunday released 14 Indian fishermen, coinciding with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's official visit to the island nation. The move is being seen as a goodwill initiative aimed at reinforcing the strengthening ties between the two neighbouring countries. Prime Minister Modi arrived in Anuradhapura earlier today as part of his official visit, strengthening India's development partnership with Sri Lanka. Over to the African continent now, where a major diplomatic effort is gaining traction to end the fighting in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. A government delegation from the DRC has held fresh talks with M23 rebels in Qatar, according to a source familiar with the discussions. The The latest meeting, held behind closed doors, follows a first round in March, that was described as positive. Negotiations are set to resume in Doha on April the 9th, with Qatar continuing its role as the mediator. These confidential talks are aimed at sustaining momentum and finding peaceful solutions to a conflict that has displaced thousands and destabilized the region for years. In a sign of progress, the Congolese army says M23 fighters have now pulled back from the strategic mining hub of Wakaili, which is the furthest west of the rebel group has reached. While neither party has commented publicly on the latest development, sources say the dialogue remains sensitive. The international community is closely watching for any signs of lasting breakthrough. Over to South America now, where in Colombia a major milestone has been reached in the country's long quest for peace. Comuneros do Sol, a guerrilla faction that broke away from the ELN, has officially agreed to disarm in a landmark deal with the Colombian government. During a ceremony held on April the 5th in southwestern city of Pasto, President Gustavo Petro oversaw the signing of 2 agreements that signal a turning point in his administration's peace efforts. A video played at the event showed the group handing over and destroying explosives, grenades and other weapons, which is clear evidence of their intent to end the violence. Roya Garzon, one of the group's leaders, declared that armed struggle is obsolete and there is no turning back to war. The deal clears the path for about 300 fighters to lay down their arms and reintegrate into civilian life. It's being called the most significant step since Petro took office in 2022 and a bold move towards national reconciliation. Listen in to what he said.
Y por eso este acuerdo de paz va hacia lo que toca, porque reconoce las nuevas realidades de la violencia en Colombia, porque la violencia está en la frontera, porque las rutas no apuntan a Bogotá, porque los puertos de Colombia son los más violentos, porque la violencia de hoy es la violencia de la economía ilícita, no es la violencia de la bandera ideológica, no es la del socialismo, no es la de los liberales antiguos ni de los conservadores antiguos. No podemos manejar un proceso de paz como si fuera de aquellas épocas. Tiene que consultar la realidad de hoy.
In Colombia, a major milestone has been reached in the country's long quest for peace. Comuneros do Sol, a guerrilla faction that broke away from the ELN, has officially agreed to disarm in a landmark deal with the Colombian government. During a ceremony held on April the 5th in southwestern city of Pasto, President Gustavo Petro oversaw the signing of 2 agreements that signals a turning point in his administration's peace efforts. A video played at the event showed the group handing over and destroying explosive grenades and other weapons, which is clear evidence of their intent to end the violence. Roya Garzon, one of the group's leaders, declared that armed struggle is obsolete and said there is no turning back to war. The deal clears the path for about 300 fighters to lay down their arms and reintegrate into civilian life. It's being called the most significant step since Petro took office. Thank you very much for joining us. We will keep you up to date with more international news updates.